11 seconds remaining. One last rush perhaps for the Flyers. Giroux to Hartnell. To Giroux. Giroux holds all the way across. Prager scores! 2.1 seconds remaining, and the Flyers are on top.
Everybody, it's Isaiah, just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey. We're back. It's the O&B Puckcast, episode number 120. We're on with the regular crew, and we're on with Tony Androckitis from InsideAHLHockey.com, answering questions from Dan, myself, Isaiah, and Chef. And we're just reconnected with Tony, so why don't we start it from there? Dan, I think you have a question for Tony.
Yeah, so, you're talking about, I've got two questions, actually. You were talking about York and Zamula. So here's a specific question. The Flyers, to me, kind of could use a top power play quarterback. Ivan Provorov doesn't really seem like the guy. Shane Gostisbehere might not be here next season, and also, not sure he's the guy. I've been read some good articles about Cam York and how he looked on the power play, and it seemed like he was generating a lot of offense. Do you think, he's a guy that could step in immediately or, a third of the way through next season and run the Flyers' top power play unit? Maybe a guy that could play like sheltered third pair minutes but be the top power play guy?
I mean, I know with the Phantoms right away he was on the power play unit. And looked really good doing so. I mean, that's certainly, I'm sure they're hoping that he could, be that power play quarterback for them. Because, he's really good at moving the puck. He's, just like it's already been said, really smooth. Plays a really, he's very calm with the puck. Like, he just never looks like he's, out of his zone, so to speak. So I think, that's definitely a good trajectory for him. It'll be interesting to see, with the expansion draft, if they lose a defenseman versus a forward at the draft, or what happens, or who they, get up top, to see, what the shakeout will be for competition for time. I'm not sure he's a guy they want, being that sixth or seventh guy versus, being a top pairing guy in the AHL to start the year. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. Come the fall, where he's at and what he's competing for.
So a question on two other guys, because of the pandemic, there was a lot of issues with guys being able to play in Canada and in the, OHL and the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and the WHL. So two 18-year-olds who played with the Phantoms this past season were the Flyers' first-round pick, Tyson Forster, and Zayd Wisdom, who was like a third or fourth round pick. And it seemed like both those guys were pretty impressive. Wisdom seemed like at first was just absolutely lighting it up, and Tyson Forster was pretty good also. Could you give you got to watch those guys on a much more regular basis than our listeners. Could you kind of give an idea of what you thought about Zayd Wisdom and Tyson Forster and what you think of their kind of NHL timelines or upside?
Yeah, and just the Phantom season in general just seemed like at different points of the season, guys were really playing well and stepping up and contributing a lot offensively. And towards the beginning of the season, the veterans sort of led the way, and Wisdom, was on a line there with, I think it was Cal O'Reilly and Ryan Fitzgerald were the two leading scorers, at the end of the season. So he started the year with those guys, and just got into the right spots. Really good quick shot, and sort of learning on the fly, obviously as an 18-year-old, and just a really good experience for him. And Forrester got the fractured shin. He got injured at the beginning of the season, so he missed a month. But once he got up to speed, and he's another guy who had a scoring surge where he'd scored multiple games, multiple goals, and really starting to take over games at the AHL level. So I think both of those guys got a huge boost in their pro experience. Now where they end up this season, I guess they'll probably end up back in the junior ranks, but just the experience of playing that pro hockey definitely be beneficial for them in the long term.
Yeah, no question. Chef?
Yeah, since we're talking about the Phantoms, and I guess we got to bring up Lappy getting that job promotion, basically a promotion, to be the head coach of the Phantoms. Now, I know there's a lot of knack on him for being the PK coach and the PK not really doing a good job during that time when he was in charge. I mean, I have to ask this because how much of the coaching is responsible? Like, how can we assess like damage or blame? Or how much of the responsibility is on the coaches for trying to implement a system, or how much of it is on the players if they're not following the system? I mean, I know he's got a great reputation for developing younger players, and that's what we've heard about. But is this a good situation for Lappy to be in? Is he going to get these younger kids to thrive in an environment?
I think we'll see. I mean, it's an interesting hire for sure. I know you reference like the NHL PK stuff, and maybe not the best role for him at the NHL level, but just his time at the NHL level as an assistant, learning around the NHL head coaches. Obviously, it seemed like a pretty quick turnaround. So, based on everything that I had heard and read, it seemed like that was something that he really wanted to do for some time now, and it was just a situation where a change was needed. And I think, I mean, I can't say for sure why or what the reason behind it is, but everything you hear about the players loving to play for him, like I feel like that's not going to be an issue at all. I'm curious to see how it's going to work. And who the assistant coaches are. I think, he sort of said in several of his media appearances shortly after the hire that he wants, some veteran assistant, and he wants a former skill player for the stuff that he's obviously maybe not his area of expertise, and a veteran on the a veteran defenseman on the defensive side. It'll be interesting to see who's around him and how the coaching staff works. But just in terms of systems play and stuff, I think it'll be a lot easier. They'll be playing 100% the exact same system, AHL to NHL, whereas in the past it was fairly similar, but there's a lot of tweaks, things that Scott Gordon did differently, based on the lineups that he had, and you have to give your hats off, tip your hat to what he's able to do, in every season, especially with the GM change and all that stuff, steering the ship through that. The teams were always, very competitive. So it'll be interesting to see how. I mean, I'm looking forward to a new era of Phantoms play and see how it all works out. But I'm not gonna, hang him out to dry or be all about it at the same time. I just want to approach it with a new guy in a new role and go from there.
Yeah, Tony, is there more to the story of why Scott Gordon was let go, other than Chuck Fletcher kind of wants to put his stamp on the organization?
I mean, based off everything that I heard, even going back to pre-pandemic, it seemed like that the possibility that both Huffman and Gordon weren't gonna even be back for the this past season, but obviously the pandemic changed everything, and there's plenty of headaches to go around. So why create another one? I could see why they both came back for this past season, and then with Huffman opting to leave, then it was just the head coach, and I guess maybe a little bit easier to pull the trigger on that if that's something that they were grooming Lappy to be an AHL head coach for them. Then you sort of can clean the slate, so to speak, now heading into a more normal season. So I know that's termed as a mutual parting of ways, but I mean, I guess that's just like the professional courtesy, in the hockey world. But to me, it just seemed like that they wanted a change in direction and a change, behind the bench. So they brought in someone else. Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Scott Gordon did a good job. It's just maybe you were kind of hitting to it unwittingly that the systems, they want more, maybe a little more consistency with how the systems meld when the players come up, and maybe there's a cultural aspect to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could pick out and cherry pick quotes if you really wanted to from certain of his media appearances, but he's just re-emphasizing that he's going to be a positive, a tough but fair and positive kind of head coach, and a coach that guys could rally around. And I feel like maybe that's what the current group needed. And I mean, obviously, since the coaching change, they've already brought back some of the same players from last season's team. So if guys had a chance to go elsewhere and decided to sign, re-sign with the Phantoms, so I think that bodes well to sort of the mindset of the group heading into the next season. So I think it's just a change was needed. I'll leave it at that. But.
Yeah. So you talked about some kids coming that are going to have to go back to the OHL, and Wisdom and Forster, and that's a shame, but that's the rules, and we only saw them because of the pandemic. Some vets are coming back, and are there some new signings, some new veterans that Chuck Fletcher inked up?
Yeah, they had a couple of AHL contracts that they wrapped up last week, and they already announced the Cal O'Reilly one earlier this week, but based off what I was told, Garrett Wilson is also re-signed to an AHL deal for next year. So O'Reilly, the captain last year, and Wilson, an alternate captain, one of the three. So, this same leadership group, with the younger players, I think there's seemed like a good mix of younger and older players last season. And, some of the guys talk about, sometimes some of the older players are, a little bit different around the younger guys and vice versa, but it seemed like they had a pretty good cohesive group last season, and looks like they're trying to bring a lot of the same pieces back, which you don't see in the AHL too often. So it'll be interesting to see how how the roster shakes out as the summer moves along.
Yeah, I mean for their small number of games that they played, they were fun to watch. I mean, the kids are part of it, but still, it's not a bad situation. There's some new signings though with what they have. Ursan is in goal, and then they bring back in a strange situation. Maybe you could explain what happened with Felix Sandstrom, and they have Ustimenko. So it's kind of crowded, but the Sandstrom situation was kind of perplexing initially. What do you think that was innate of?
Yeah, so I guess according to the Flyers, the Swedish team put something out based on a report from a reporter in the like in Sweden, maybe he was, leaning towards doing that until, I don't know, maybe he just changed his mind last second. It just, I don't really think that has anything to do with, Laperriere being the head coach of the Phantoms now or anything like that. But maybe he just decided to, give another go to try to, get it through to the NHL. Or it's tough for a lot of, especially this past season with the salaries being, decimated down there, playing for like 40% of what they're assigned to or whatever it ended up being. Like, I could see how that's kind of a deterrent to why would you want to go back to. I mean, obviously it won't be like that this season, but to go away from home and be in a situation like that, I could see trying to refine your game, closer to home, which, some players have been doing, like they still have the rights for Vorobiev, and, Rubtsov played over in the KHL last year and, was re-signed, and I guess, I'm not sure 100% on it, but it seems like he's going to be, back in North America. So, just a lot of the same guys are coming back. That they've re-signed Linus Sandin as well, and they have quite a few younger players there, like Bunneman's a restricted free agent. I'm sure will get qualified, and Shushko and Ratcliffe, of course, and it'll be interesting to see like what players don't make the NHL roster that come down. There'll be a couple always. So
yeah, absolutely. Dan?
Yeah, so to move away from specific player questions, I was just curious because Tony, you really kind of made a name for yourself as one of the top AHL guys out there. So I was just kind of curious, how did you initially get interested in kind of covering the AHL as closely as you have, and like what are some of your favorite things about covering minor league hockey and really like digging in on that stuff?
Yeah, so I actually grew up, and I'm still living in northeastern Pennsylvania, pretty close to like 15 minutes away from Wilkes-Barre, where the Pittsburgh Penguins minor league team, the Wilkes-Barre Penguins, play. So I just was into minor league hockey just from going to games as a kid versus moving on to school and going away to Penn State and being 2 hours away, and just sort of wanted to keep up on what they were doing. So I sort of just started a little little blog in a journalism class, and was able to do that for a semester, and just it was interesting to keep tabs on what was going on. So when I would come home from the holiday break and stuff, or after semester for playoffs, I would just be sort of know what was going on. You could listen to it on the radio, and obviously as time moved on, we got a lot more advanced with how you could stream it and all that, and watch get a lot more inside access to it than you would normally. But just sort of always stuck with it, and I just really like the AHL. I just think it's a really good learning experience for the players as well as like the media. And that these NHL scrums, even before it was all online this past year, just 10 to 15 reporters all crunching in and trying to be heard and get their questions asked. Whereas the AHL, a lot of times sometimes it's just me, or be me and one or two other people, and you could develop a lot better work ethic and sort of work report at the AHL level. And then if you're the NHL is what you want to do, then you could sort of springboard that. But there's a lot more unknowns in the AHL, and it's just like sort of like a wild card, and you get to see players develop, and before they get to the NHL, it's always cool to watch a random NHL game, just remember, I've seen that guy play 2 seasons in this AHL city, or even if it's not a Phantom, former Phantom or former Flyer, just the amount of people you see later, and just like you watch them develop, and before they were sort of a big name player. Because I feel like by the time they get to the NHL, that like everybody knows everything about these guys. Once you're in the league for a couple of years, it's just more interesting. You're always getting new players to sort of learn about.
Yeah, definitely. One of the players that came to mind when you were talking about that process was Wade Allison, who's instantly a fan favorite, as much for how animated he is, and kind of reminds us of Scott Hartnell. And obviously he's going to want to forge his own identity. Is he as amiable, around the team and as he seems to be to the fan base?
Yeah, I mean, we got to interview him a couple of times. Everything was on Zoom, so it's sort of hard to gain really like a personal rapport. But just seemed like a fun guy to be around. It seemed like he was always laughing and joking around. And just a lot for that. You say that for a lot of the guys on the team. It just seemed like they're, just a good team and a good environment and just really rolling. So, but yeah, like you said, he's definitely going to look to, I would be surprised if he's not, in the NHL lineup. If not to start the next season at the beginning, then very shortly after. I don't see him as being an AHL guy for much longer, if at all. So I think he's definitely a guy that should be in the conversation for sure.
Sure, yeah. I know a lot of fans are counting on that. Can we keep some of these guys? Tony, it's like that's the other part of it, is with the level of change that the Flyers would seem to need. There's going to be some broken hearts, and there's going to be some players with the Phantoms that are going to be missing some teammates because they're going to be included in deals that the Flyers feel they have to make to push this thing forward, since they really haven't done much in the last 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, and like, just overstate the obvious, but what happens with the expansion draft and what player they lose in that process, or maybe they lose more than one player. Like, it really, especially like forward versus defense, like what position gets taken is going to change, probably a lot of things. They have to have multiple plans for, multiple possibilities. I just think everyone's in a big freeze until, this next couple, is it a week and a half? I think the 17th or so. I think everything will start booming. It's, you wonder what deals are sort of waiting for after that, like, that are unofficial, official, like they're just waiting for the deadline because you want to protect who you want to protect, right? So
sure, yeah,
there'll be a handful of. Plus, Seattle's going to obviously, like Vegas, when they came in the league, they made a bunch of different, other moves as well. So ideal that get made will be interesting as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you there. We had speculated there might be one price before the expansion draft, and might maybe more afterwards. So yeah, July 17th is the deadline for the protection list for the expansion draft.
My question would be, how much you see them more than we do? And when the Flyers, one knock on the Flyers, especially I guess Hextall when he was drafting, was yes, he did acquire a lot of assets. But how many of these assets are, how many of the kids, I shouldn't call them assets, but how many of these young guys on the Phantoms here are the same type of player? Like there was a mold that Hexy went for, and it seemed like it could be, if you're describing of one player, you could be talking about the 4 different players. How concerning would that be to Flyers and Phantom fans, knowing that you got a lot of redundancy inside the farm system?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a much better mix now. I mean, you look at a player like Forrester, he's going to be a really good shooter, and they really need that shoot first mentality kind of player. And Wade Allison's kind of like a power forward mold. He's going to be a guy that could get his shot off quick and go to those dirty areas. And I mean, they have a much better. I see what you're saying, I guess, over the past couple of years, but I think they have a much better mix. And even defensively, like they had a bunch of rookies, first year guys last year, all learning on the fly. And there's a lot to like there. They have a bunch of different guys, sort of all different players too. And York, sort of an offensive guy, and Zamala, sort of like a good two-way guy who can, play offensively and defend well. And even Linus Hogberg, he was a really good two-way guy, playing good defensively and getting pucks out. And I mean, so the list goes on and on. I just think they have a good mix of younger players, and I guess they're bringing back a lot of the same veterans. So it'll be interesting to see how their roster fills out. But definitely like where they're heading.
All right. So, Tony, owing to the fact that we missed out a little bit of the first part of the show, just a reminder to everybody that the website is InsideAHLHockey.com. And what other contact information or social media coordinates can you let us in on?
Yeah, I mean, on social media, the Twitter handle for the website is @InsideAHLHockey. My own account is just @Tony Androck, ANDROCK. And then, yeah, as like you said, we do a small subscription. A lot of the articles are behind a paywall, stuff you won't, get elsewhere. A lot of one-on-one interviews with, players or coaches, or, it's a lot more than just a story about, this game or that game. So, and, I do a lot with the Phantoms and sort of stuff on the East Coast, but we've also, over the years been adding, people contributing, all across the league in Canada and, out west in California and, throughout the Midwest. So, just like a network sort of people on the ground, actually, at these games and, sort of in the know and know what they're, what they're doing and what they're talking about. So, yeah, it's definitely something that's taken a while to build, but, now that there's hockey and not a whole, a year break before the next season, I really like the direction of the website, and we're always, adding, more. It seems like every other week I'm, looking to add more, writers and photographers around. So something that's also still, building as we're moving along.
Yep. You have to subscribe to InsideAHLHockey.com. Like Dan said earlier, Tony's broken in more than a few stories. Tony, one last question before we let you go. Danny Briere, is he now part of an affiliation with the Boston Bruins? Was that the Maine Mariners?
Yeah, the ECHL. Yeah, there's a little bit of shuffling with ECHL and affiliates. Yeah, Maine is with Providence and Boston now.
Okay.
Yeah, that was. I think that happened just like a week or two ago.
Yeah,
maybe not even. Yeah.
I was reading that way back in the day. They were a Flyer affiliate, and Ken Linsman came to town. He was a big deal back in circa '78, and everybody was looking forward to him coming along. And they played the Philadelphia Firebirds at the Convention Center. So I always have a warm spot in my heart for the Maine Mariners. So Danny Briere is now managing that club as part of the Boston organization. Interesting. So Tony, thanks so much for coming on. We got to have you on during the season or right before to get a recap of everything that we're previewing.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. I'm always happy to help out and jump on when I can. I haven't done too much in the whole podcast world, but I mean, if people want to listen, I'll blab on about the AHL and the Phantoms. So.
Anytime, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care now.
Yep, have a good one.
Now, the Maine Mariners, isn't that where Doc Emmerich got his start? Like in AHL hockey or minor league hockey? Isn't that where he learned from Gene Hart a little bit? Met Gene Hart there doing that, or I think I remember something about that.
He might have. So I'm not really sure. You got me on that one. That should be right up my alley. I should know that one. So
well, yeah. Interesting thing is my dad was in the Air Force and he got stationed up at Bangor after Vietnam because they messed up or something. And he ended up doing the last of his tour up there because they messed up some orders or something. And my mom was the hockey person in our family, really.
Right.
And it wasn't far away from there, when she was Bangor. And I remember her having Maine Mariner stuff, like a shirt or something along those lines. Her telling us that, oh, yes, this is how Reading is the minor league for the Phillies. This is the minor league for the Flyers.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure. So I've always known about them. It's neat.
Well, I'm sure she didn't mind that instead of if he was stationed overseas and they made a mistake and he ended up in Bangor, Maine, I'm sure she was relieved.
Well, she hated it up there, but she was relieved my dad was home, I guess.
No, it worked out okay. So, gents, we've been off a few weeks, or you guys have had a few weeks off, and I figure the rest of the time we have tonight for you to sound off about some of the issues and scuttlebutt rumors, and you got to start with Doug Hamilton and Elliot Friedman saying a few things about some defensemen that are on the Flyers' radar. That Doug Hamilton is not their top target. That doesn't mean he's not looking at him, but more likely that Seth Jones is, and also that recently Elliot Friedman also said that Seth Jones is someone the Flyers are definitely interested in, but not without term, signing a contract. So that's the latest I'm hearing, and I'm hat tip to Ryan Gilbert on that last little bit. Dan, what's your feeling overall, and maybe honing in on some of the latest info?
I mean, there's a lot going on because it feels like Seth Jones is, the main guy that they are sort of looking at right now. I'm sure that, Chuck Fletcher, I'm sure, knows that there's many things that he would like to do out there. It seems like right now Seth Jones is the focus, but the problem is that it's unclear as to if he will sign an extension or not before being traded to someone. And from reading, there's no info out there that says this is for sure, this is not for sure, which makes it difficult, right? It's all sort of like insiders' thoughts. And so you read that, okay, maybe Chuck Fletcher doesn't want to trade for Jones unless he's willing to make a long-term commitment with the team. But this is all impacted because the return that Columbus is going to get is going to be a lot more if Seth Jones will extend somewhere. So it's a very tricky trade negotiation for Columbus because they would obviously rather trade him somewhere that he will sign a contract extension because they will be able to get more. So there's all these variables that go into trading Seth Jones, trading for Seth Jones. And so I still believe that the Flyers are the front runners in the Seth Jones sweepstakes. But I still think there's a lot that's going to have to get worked out. And I think it's going to depend on what Blue Jackets GM Jarmo Kekalainen wants to do and how long he wants to wait. Like, theoretically, they could wait until the season starts and they get to the trade deadline and they could probably get more from a contender for him as a rental. So it's a difficult scenario out there. And I'm sure that the Flyers are going to end up making a lot of moves this offseason, but it's hard to know exactly, it's hard to wade through the facts and the projections. And so I'm kind of as obviously the Stanley Cup, if it ends tonight with Tampa winning, maybe some things will start gearing up. But as we get to the expansion draft and the real draft and free agency opening, I guess we'll see what happens. But it does seem like Seth Jones is the main target right now, and he's the domino that people are waiting to fall to see then what happens after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention, because we're talking about Columbus, and Dan, you can help me with this name if I kind of mess it up. Is it Matisse Kivlenieks, a goaltender in their system, was
that sounds like it could be right.
Killed in a fireworks accident, and only 24, played a few games, I think, this year for the Blue Jackets, and just a tragic situation. And, Chef, it brings me back. It's not quite the same, but Dmitry Trotishny died in a boating accident. That was really, I'm not going to get into the judgment of whether someone was cavalier or whatever. It's just, I remember when I heard about Trotishny, who had a really nice rookie season. He's a really forgotten player for the Flyers. I think he played in the 99 season. It was really a shock because he was that was a position even back then the Flyers really needed, and it was sad. So I imagine that even though he's not as far along as Stratishny was, this kind of tragedy really hits home.
Yeah, it does, and you wonder, not to be selfish or anything, how much it's going to affect the talks for Columbus. I mean, Korpisalo has been thrown out there as links to Flyers by several people, including myself, and I look at it now, and I was thinking about what Dan was just saying, with Jones. I mean, and you had mentioned Hamilton too. I'm going to take like a very easy, like cut and dry approach. I mean, to get Seth Jones and, possibly, I mean, I don't know how much would it take to get Korpisalo in a deal like that too as well, maybe a pairing, but it's definitely going to take a lot less of movement, shuffling of money and of contracts and stuff like that. If you were, to acquire Dougie Hamilton, and you're, of course, yeah, like everybody says, you're only buying term, but you have to make that room, and currently they're not even close to that room. So, and then how much of it really can you address on like the backup goalie and a second pair defenseman possibly, or a forward that's gonna change the whole culture of this team. I made jokes about, like, when we were on our last show that, like, oh, here's the 80 moves I would make to make the Flyers a contender. But, I laugh at every week. I had a good laugh about it. But in all seriousness, you can never make those moves in one season, if you're, but also too, at the same time, you're going to have to make some moves, and how many are too many or how many are unrealistic is going to be the key thing when it comes down to it. So it'll be interesting to see, how Columbus is going to move forward. And they're going to lose two fairly large pieces of their team, and they're not going to want to not get something back for that either. So.
Yeah. We are playing the waiting game. There's no doubt about it. The one thing that comes to mind when I think about this scenario is the something we're going to have to wait on. Charlie O'Connor wrote a great article in The Athletic about what a perfect Philadelphia Flyers offseason would look like, 10 steps to get back to contention. But we are not going to go through that because we're actually next Sunday, we're recording with Charlie. He'll be on the O&B Puckcast for the first time. So, but it did kind of remind me of all the things you wanted to do, but we'll hold off on some of that. I do recommend reading that article, though. It's a really good one. But, Dan, getting back to the goaltenders, one of the things that's interesting was listening to Jason Martinez, who was just on our last full show, was talking to Kevin Woodley about who would be a really good fit behind Carter Hart. And he was talking about, like, the Clear Sight Analytics and that website, the old backup goaltender for the New York Rangers. And he was saying that based on the chances that the Flyers gave up last year, somebody like Ullmark from Buffalo would actually be a better fit than Korpisalo based on how many goals he gives up, through a screen or from east-west passes and all that kind of thing. But that position is one that the Flyers are going to have to address, and it's going to be more this year than just getting an older guy who will play 30 games at most.
Yeah, they're probably going to have to move on from Brian Elliott just because they probably need someone a little bit younger who can play more games. And Ullmark's really interesting. I mean, he's an unrestricted free agent. He's 27 years old, so he's pretty young. It's hard to evaluate guys who are playing for teams as bad as Buffalo, so there's some wild card potential there. I would have no issues if Ullmark is, the guy that they end up with is the backup. I think obviously the more important part is Carter Hart, but the backup is also a sort of a really important one for this team. So yeah, that's going to be one of the more interesting things to track is what happens there for sure.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question, Dan, because I thought of you when I heard somebody say this, or it was on Twitter, I forget where it came from, that looking at the Canadians and kind of concluding that, maybe the Flyers aren't that far away, and, get in the playoffs, anything can happen, make a move here, make a move there. And I'm looking at the composition of the rosters, and I'm thinking, like I was talking with Amy Johnson last week, I mean, the composition of these rosters is so different. They have guys that have won cups. They're grinding kind of playoff style players. And the Flyers have a real dearth of that kind of forward in particular.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, when we've talked a lot about on this show about kind of changing the makeup of the forwards, right? Like my ideal offseason, and we'll get into it with Charlie, kind of like what he wrote in his article, but my ideal offseason is go out and get a top pairing right-handed defenseman in a trade or free agency, maybe add a second pair right-handed defenseman, depending on what you're going to move out and what you're going to need to get back. Change the makeup of the forwards. You're going to have to move either a JVR or a Voracek probably. And I think you'll probably have to move something like a Konechny. And I think you want to bring in forwards that are maybe have a little bit more size, a little bit more grit. Just changing the makeup there because they need kind of a shakeup. And then, like we talked about the backup goalie, but that's what I'm kind of interested to see is I think that there's so much to be done with this team. And yes, changing the makeup of the forwards is something that, I'd love to see them. And he's not a big guy, but like a Tyler Bertuzzi for Detroit is a guy I'd like them to look at. And there's going to be some guys in free agency. I mean, look, Corey Perry was a great free agent signing by the Canadians last offseason. There's going to be some guys like that the Flyers might be able to bring in just to change things around a little bit.
And also to kind of show them the way. And when we talk about the cultural aspect, Chef, I know you want to ask a question, but it kind of leads me to, like, that's part of it too. It's when you think of Justin Braun telling the fans, the reporters, he's never seen a team that was so fragile. I mean, that's part of it as well.
Yeah, you definitely need to change that culture. You need people that want to win and that know how to win, that when you get kicked, you can, stand back up again. And what made me think about, because you had mentioned Voracek or JVR leaving, how much, I think that pretty much I feel like I can say, and I don't know how you guys feel, but does that pretty much eliminate like Seattle with their new coach, Dave? Does that mean that we could take Ghost off of like who's going to get picked and go to Seattle now? I mean, it didn't seem like he was a favorite by the coach back when he played here. So I'm just thinking that, is it better for us too, that maybe Hackstall is their coach, and is this leaning more towards getting rid of Voracek, because he seemed to always put Voracek on the ice no matter what he did. So maybe we can, maybe our Christmas present's going to come a little early, that maybe he's going to get pulled.
I'll tell you what, I don't know how much sway he's going to have. I mean, the alpha dog in the room is going to be Ron Francis.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
but if Dave Hackstall, in kind of like contrition for his tenure here, could convince Ron Francis that snot and balls are going to make Seattle a better team, I'm all for it. and since he described G and Voracek as having both, hey, man, I wouldn't count on it. I'm not holding my breath. But
yeah, with our luck, it'll be Hague, right?
Yeah, it'll be Hague, right? Be Hague. Dan?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on is because, everyone or a lot of people have been saying, oh, the Flyers need to get Jack Eichel, do whatever it takes to get Jack Eichel. And all along I've sort of been saying, listen, Jack Eichel, when healthy, is a great hockey player, but you can't forget that the guy wanted to have an unprecedented back surgery that no professional athlete, at least in the NHL or the NBA or MLB or NFL, has come back from. And that's sort of been my line all along. Is like, I don't want Jack Eichel because the price is going to be too high for a guy that, do we even know he's going to play hockey next season? Yeah. So before the show, I guess it was either last night, Sean Simpson from TSN tweeted out, interesting things I'm hearing on Eichel. He wants and needs surgery for a serious back injury. The Sabres are trying to have him hold off and let the acquiring team take the risk. Can't imagine any team making a deal without seeing medical records. So I just wanted to read that, because to anyone out there who wants Jack Eichel, like, I think this is one where you want someone else to take on the risk of Jack Eichel for what the cost might be.
Oh, yeah. You know what? And I'll jump in here real fast. As somebody who just recently looked into neck surgery, and you're being told what's going to happen down the line. You're not going to be able to drive 6 to 8 weeks. Your head's going to be in a halo or a hard collar for almost 22 hours a day. It's not something you really want to go with right away. I mean, it was loaded. When I heard all this stuff, I'm like, all right, let's do physical therapy. Let's do injections. Let's do everything we can. And hopefully at the very last resort, that's an issue. Now, I can't imagine being a professional athlete and having to think about this to extend your career, or the risks of it to extend your career. I mean, straight up that. I mean, Dan, I'm going to ask you, because you're the one that brought it up. What's Eichel's worth now? Is he? I don't think he's worth more than TK in the first, because if that's the case, you're assuming all the risk. It can't be any more than that, right?
I mean, if they offered us Jack Eichel for Travis Konechny in our first round pick this year, I mean, I'm probably still doing it. But the asking price seems to be a lot higher than that.
4 assets.
And so, it all depends on what we're willing to get back. I feel like there's another team out there that might be willing to give up more, because the Flyers are in win now mode, and we just, again, don't know if he's going to be back. So
and you're speaking to win now. So he does it. He gets his surgery. It's 6 months easy. 6 months easy that he's not coming back from. So I'm just looking at it like, if you're in a win now mentality, like you just said, and I agree with you in that it doesn't make sense to acquire Eichel.
All right, let me give you some details. Here's the thing. I had neck surgery, so it doesn't make me an expert. Don't get me wrong. Everything is predicated upon what level of the cervical spine, because I understand it's his neck, although, it's all in the back, right? So that is very, very important. The higher up it is, the worse it is. I think Sterling Sharp had a C2-3 fusion, and he couldn't get a job. Gary Roberts, I think either he had a fractured vertebrae or it was lower down in the cervical spine, and he was able to come back, but it took him a long time. But that was 30 years ago. What Eichel apparently wants to do is to replace the disc, which has been done for about 10 years, especially like the last 5 years, but not to someone who would take the kind of impact that a professional hockey player would. And it's very, very risky, just because we do not know. So I without knowing that information, my gut reaction is steer clear if that is the case.
Absolutely. And that's what I think that's what I was alluding to. It doesn't seem to be worth the risk. You're assuming all the risk in a deal like that. Even if it was 2, 3, 4 assets, it still doesn't matter. You're assuming all the risk. And in the mentality that this team should have right now is, we got to win. We got to prove to Sean Couturier we're committed to winning, because otherwise we're going to lose him too. So there's a lot riding on this. And I don't think bringing, as much as I liked him, he's a very dynamic player, and I think he could have been great. But you don't need that type of player right now, even if you have to wait, because you're in that win now mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. Look. He's a great talent. I hope he gets it together. A standard fusion. The problem with that is it a lot of times ends up that you need another fusion in the segment above or below it because you have instability as soon as you fuse. The average Joe on the street can go back to work and live their life. They're not going to be getting hit like you would in the NHL, where you're more likely to have the kind of impact that could cause that instability. So it's a real tough situation for Jack. Dan, let me ask you something. Say the Flyers spend a little bit less money on a player, or they get Jones for this year and his contract is manageable until his new deal kicks in. Would you be interested in Nate Schmidt as a second pair defenseman at the right price?
You know, it's an interesting question. I think that there's guys I would want to look at before Nate Schmidt. I mean, Nate Schmidt, the problem with Nate Schmidt is he's got 4 more years on a deal that he signed for, $6 million a year. And I'm just not sure that he wouldn't be better off on the second pair with a guy like an Adam Larson or a David Savard or something like that.
Martino?
And Schmidt's a left-handed defenseman too. So, you're probably looking more for a right-handed guy. So I don't think he's an ideal fit. And I think because you really got to get it right this offseason, I think that probably Chuck Fletcher is going to be first looking for ideal fits. I think if he strikes out and starts whiffing, that Nate Schmidt's a guy maybe you look at. But I don't think he'd be one of the first guys I'd look at.
Yep. I kind of agree
By
with
the
that.
way, one quick thing on Seth Jones is most people are saying, and it sounds like maybe Chuck Fletcher's looking at it the same way, that they'd only want to trade for him if there's an extension. And I think maybe I've seen you say something like that on Twitter. I might be wrong, but
yes,
I would actually be interested in trading for him without an extension because you're not going to have to give up as much. And the other thing is there's still some, a lot of division amongst people on how good he is right now. His advanced stats have kind of dropped off the cliff the last few years, and he still, passes the eye test all right. But I'd almost be okay with hey, we're going to trade for you. We're not going to give up as much because it's a rental. And then you've got to prove it to us. And if you prove that you're worth the money, we'll pay you the money. And maybe you risk that he has a really good year and ends up going somewhere else. But because I think this coming season is such a pivotal season for the Flyers with Sean Couturier and Claude Giroux both in the final year of their contracts, I don't hate the idea of not giving up as much for Seth Jones for a 1 year and kind of making him prove it.
I think after what happened with Niskanen, the Flyers would not be open to doing that. I think when they deal with this position, this issue, I think they want to shut the door on that for a good 5-year period. I hear what you're saying. I don't agree with it, but I respect your rationale. But I don't think that the Flyers would want to go there. I think they want to solve this problem.
You might be right that they don't want to go there. I would personally would not be opposed to it.
Now, I hear you. Don't agree, but I hear you.
That's all right. You're allowed to have a different opinion. There you go.
Okay. Well, so the big I got one big question left before we call it a night. But I just want to remind people of the dates, the important dates. I referenced the protection list deadline is July 17th. That July 21st, Seattle's going to make their selections. Okay, you think back to what Vegas did, the big deal with Marc-Andre Fleury, and it turned out to be a big deal, actually. July 23rd, that's when the NHL draft begins, and they finish up rounds 2 to 7 on the 24th. And then July 28th, it's free agent frenzy. We're in for 11 days of super intense, condensed, silly season. So we're going to have a fair amount of coverage for you, and we might have to put together 15-minute shows to get reactions when we can get, we can lure Dan to gyms of South Street so we can get the finest cheesesteaks and hoagies and all that kind of stuff. We get you up from DC, get you up for that. Dan. 400 South Street in Philadelphia. You got to check them out. And then look, if you live down there, No problem. They use DoorDash. You'll get that delicious food right to your door. So just remember, Jim South Street, 400 South Street. No, I did not intend to do that, but I just thought of that. Gents, Jim South Street. Thanks for understanding. It'll throw a steak in my face when I go down there finally. Listen, Nolan Patrick, I'll close the night with this. Nolan Patrick has a certain value in fans' minds, right? And I think people were kind of holding on to what he was as a second-round pick. And you know that I've been sounding the clarion call for, hey, culture's got to change. Is it really important to get rid of as many guys that really don't want to be here if, and that's a big capital I, capital F, they don't want to be here, so they can do something to get out of this funk culturally, which I think is a real thing, that you take a little bit less so you can turn the page and get this franchise going? Or do you think, hey, listen, each player is an asset, they have value, we got to max that value out? Chef, you're raising your hand. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, you remember, about this time last year, or maybe earlier or later, I can't really remember when, I said I was all open to it. I said, you know what, show us what if you can play, we will pay. I have no problem with giving him a contract, like making him, like, show me what you got. And I thought they came to a very reasonable offer for Nolan Patrick. Now I say, he's got to go. I mean, and I understand, maybe it's just me, and I'm not a big fan of even protecting him. If somebody could take him off my hands, I'm happy with that. I don't care. And at this point, this is how low on the scale he's gone for me, is who is more valuable to this team now, him or Knack? At least Knack tries. He doesn't give up. He might have had a bad season and made bad judgments or bad calls, or bad plays when he was out there. He didn't make the right play, but at least he tried. He showed up.
I don't want him either. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know. I totally agree with you. But at this point, I don't think Nolan Patrick has great trade value either. So I'm thinking that, Knack is somebody that somebody might want for their fourth line or out there. So to me, it has more value. And that's where I stand with him. I just think he needs a new change of scenery and wish him luck, but, oh, well, bye.
Yeah, not a fan. He has a nickname. I call him Mopey. Remember the old Gumby? Remember Gumby and Pokey, and he had a dog who kept saying nope, and so they called him Nopey. So and Nolan Patrick fit right in there as Mopey. But listen, I don't know if Nolan has personal problems, and we shouldn't be making a joke. He looks like a young man who's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. So I don't want to just slag on him, but I'm ready to move on. And I'd be willing to take less than market value, although I still would protect him instead of Nick Obey-Kubel, he was a 2014 draft pick. His best, in my mind, isn't good enough. So, but I do think it's important to get back to my original point. I think we got to turn the page on some guys that we've been supposedly, quote unquote, building with. Dan, you have any thoughts about that before we close for tonight?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's part of why I would trade away Konechny too. I think he's got a lot of value, and I'm not looking to get rid of him, but I don't know. People have been comparing Farabee and Konechny because they're both wingers with value, young wingers with value, and I see Farabee getting better a lot faster than Konechny does, and I don't know if it's an off the ice work ethic type of thing. I don't think Konechny's doesn't have a good work ethic, but there were some comments that Chuck Fletcher made going into the off season about some of the Canadian guys, young guys, maybe not having as much practice time, and to me it seemed almost like a veiled shot at some of those guys. I don't know if it was Patrick or Konechny, or I wouldn't be upset if both of those guys were not here next season. Patrick, I completely agree on. I think if all things remain equal right now, you've got to protect him for the expansion draft, because I still think he has some value. I think he has more value than Nicholas Aube-Kubel. I don't mind Aubé-Kubel. I mean, if his upside is a good fourth line type of winger who can hit, who can score, but I don't think his hockey IQ is that high. I mean, he took a lot of really bad penalties this season.
Awful.
And I think that the Flyers have guys that could replace him, like a Lazinski, or, Allison's going to play higher up the lineup. But, I would be fine with both Patrick and Konechny, not being here. I think from a defense perspective, it seems like maybe Ghost is the kind of guy who, won't be here and maybe rub some people the wrong way. I thought he was, quite honestly, one of their best defensemen this season, and I like how brash he was in press conferences after games and being honest about stuff. But I also know that he does rub some people the wrong way. So, I think maybe, moving on from Ghost, from Patrick, from Konechny, and bringing in some high-quality players could be a nice way to kind of shake things up.
Yeah. I think Shane Gostisbehere is growing up. Maybe it just happened a little bit too late for him here. I think Konechny is somebody who'll burn you, who also could grow up a little bit, and that could happen. But listen, you got to take chances. You need to change things over. And if they get good value in a trade, I don't have a problem with it. Farabee, I agree. Farabee is somebody they should prioritize and hang on to, unless it was like an unbelievable deal for a player that could be a game changer for the Flyers. Because Farabee, when he's not scoring, and as he matures, this will even be more the case, will play the defensive side of the game. He'll create a turnover. He'll back check. He'll do a lot of things that we're seeing the Lightning do right now to frustrate the hell out of Canadians. And right now, TK just is not capable of contributing on that side of the puck the way Farabee can. Even if TK probably has a higher upside in terms of total points and play driving, I like Farabee's game better, and I would definitely prioritize him. So anyway, with that, like I said, we'll be back next week. We're going to have Charlie O'Connor on from The Athletic and Broad Street Hockey. So we're going to close it out here. Chef, why don't you give them your social media coordinates?
Yeah, well, you can catch me at Chef to the Lappy on Twitter.
Fantastic. Dan?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at dsilver88. And we'll have some good hockey banter. It's going to be a really fun July for sure. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. And, of course, I'm Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah _, don't forget that _520 on Twitter. Of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're on 12 podcast platforms. We're on Gab. We're on YouTube, of course. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, subscribe, follow, whatever is appropriate for your platform. And because, look, if you do that, give us a rating. 5-star ratings are appreciated. And a review. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyers podcast, and that's really important. That's really getting better, too. I appreciate your listenership as we move into this off season. We really do. So until next week, everybody take care.